Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today we're diving into a case that shook a small Australian community to its core. A case filled with heartbreak, unanswered questions, and a desperate search for justice. It was March 25, 2022, in Mayfield, a quiet suburb of Newcastle, Australia. 21-year-old Mackenzie Anderson, known to her friends as Max, was at home in her modest apartment on Crebert Street. She was a young mother, her life revolving around her 23-month-old son. Around 10:40 p.m., a frantic call reached the local police. A neighbor, startled by screams, reported a disturbance at Mackenzie's unit. The police rushed to the scene. When they arrived at the Crebert Street apartment, they found a horrific sight. This case isn't just about a single night. It's about a system, a relationship, and a series of failures that led to an unthinkable outcome. As investigators began piecing together the days leading up to that fateful night, they turned to Mackenzie's life, her dreams, her struggles, and the relationships that shaped her world, to understand how things went so wrong. Born and raised in Newcastle, New South Wales, Mackenzie grew up in a close-knit family. Her mother, Tabitha Ackritt, a dental hygienist, was a pillar of support, and their bond was evident in the heartfelt tributes Tabitha later shared. Mackenzie was also close to her stepfather and friends, who described her as the heart of their circle. She had a knack for making people laugh, often sharing snippets of her life on social media, where her TikTok videos captured her humor and strength as a young mother. Her 23-month-old son was her world, and she poured her energy into creating a stable life for him, despite the hardships she faced. Mackenzie's life hadn't been easy. By her early 20s, she was navigating the challenges of single motherhood while living in a modest unit on Crebert Street. Friends said she was determined to break free from a cycle of hardship, working to provide for her son and dreaming of a brighter future. Her relationship with Tyrone Thompson, her ex-partner, cast a long shadow over her life. The two began dating in late 2019, and their on-again, off-again relationship was marked by turbulence. By October 2021, Thompson had been jailed for assaulting Mackenzie, intimidating her, and damaging her property. He served a short sentence with a non-parole period of just over 4 months and was released on March 9, 2022. An apprehended violence order was in place, meant to keep Thompson away from Mackenzie, prohibiting any contact or visits to her home. But Mackenzie's friends later revealed she lived in constant fear, convinced Thompson would come after her once he was free. She messaged a friend, saying, "My ex Tyrone just got out of jail from what he did to me and is still being weird and harassing me. He couldn't last 24 hours." Despite the AVO, Thompson reached out to Mackenzie almost immediately after his release, calling her and sending messages from multiple social media accounts. Friends said Mackenzie felt trapped, torn between fear and the hope that things might stabilize. One heartbreaking detail emerged later. Mackenzie had asked for a new set of knives for Christmas 2021, a practical gift for her home. Those same knives would later become part of the tragedy. The night of March 25, 2022, started like any other in the quiet suburb of Mayfield. But beneath the surface of this ordinary night, a tragedy was unfolding, one that would leave a community in shock and a family shattered. Mackenzie's apartment on Crebert Street was a small, unassuming unit in a block of flats, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by sight, if not by name. That evening, she wasn't alone. A male friend, whose identity was closely guarded in early reports, was with her, along with her 23-month-old son, who was likely asleep in his crib. Tyrone Thompson, her ex-partner, was also present at some point during the night, despite the apprehended violence order that barred him from contacting her or visiting her home. The details of how Thompson ended up at her apartment remain murky, but court records later revealed that he had been asked to leave multiple times that evening. His refusal to comply set the stage for what would become a devastating confrontation. Alarmed, the neighbor dialed emergency services, describing a scene that sounded dire: a woman's voice in distress, a man's voice shouting, and the unmistakable sense that something was terribly wrong. The exact words of the call weren't made public, but the urgency was clear enough to prompt an immediate response from the Newcastle City Police District. When police arrived at the apartment block, they were met with a harrowing sight. Mackenzie lay lifeless on the veranda outside her unit, her body surrounded by blood. The scene was chaotic, with paramedics soon joining the officers in a frantic attempt to save her. Despite their efforts, Mackenzie was pronounced dead at the scene, her injuries too severe to overcome. Her toddler son, found inside the apartment, was mercifully unharmed. Local Commander Superintendent Wayne Humphrey later described the scene as horrendous. The police found a man at the scene, later identified as Tyrone Thompson, sitting cross-legged at the top of the communal stairs, his hand bloodied and injured. He was loud, demanding medical attention for his wound, even as officers focused on the grim task at hand. A broken knife handle and blade were found near Mackenzie, stark evidence of the brutality that had unfolded. Thompson was arrested and taken to John Hunter Hospital under police guard for treatment of his injury, which raised immediate questions about his role in the events. What preceded this tragedy was a series of events that had been building for weeks. After his release from prison on March 9, 2022, Thompson wasted no time breaching the AVO. He began contacting Mackenzie, calling her, messaging her from multiple social media accounts, and even reaching out to people close to her new partner. Court documents later revealed that Mackenzie had spent much of the previous 6 days with Thompson, despite her fear of him. Friends said she felt trapped, unsure how to break free from his persistent attempts to reconnect. That night, a gathering at her apartment included Thompson and her male friend, though the exact dynamics remain unclear. What is known is that tensions escalated. The male friend, who had left earlier in the evening, returned to check on her, only to witness a horrific scene. Thompson standing over Mackenzie, who was already on the ground. Investigators later learned that Mackenzie had been trying to protect herself in the weeks leading up to that night. She had reached out to domestic violence advocacy groups, emailing them to request help with security measures like cameras and reinforced doors. The night of March 25th wasn't a sudden explosion of violence, but the culmination of a pattern of control and intimidation. Thompson had been jailed in October 2021 for assaulting Mackenzie, intimidating her, and damaging her property, yet the system allowed him back into her life just 16 days before her death. The AVO, meant to be her shield, was little more than a piece of paper. As the initial shock settled, the Newcastle City Police District, under the banner of Strikeforce Slant, launched a meticulous investigation to uncover what had happened in those chaotic final moments. The investigation began with the crime scene itself. Detectives meticulously combed through Mackenzie's apartment, cataloging every detail. The veranda where her body was found was a focal point, marked by bloodstains and the shattered remnants of a knife. Forensic teams collected the fragments, knowing they could hold critical clues about the weapon and its wielder. Inside the apartment, officers found signs of a disturbance: overturned furniture, scattered belongings, and traces of blood that hinted at a confrontation that had moved from inside to the veranda. Digital evidence became a cornerstone of the investigation. Mackenzie's phone and social media accounts revealed a trail of fear and desperation. Investigators found messages between Mackenzie and Thompson, showing they had been in contact since his release. Some exchanges were tense, others oddly amicable, suggesting a complex dynamic. Thompson had also messaged people close to Mackenzie's new partner, attempting to gather information or assert control. These communications, pulled from servers and cross-referenced with phone records, showed he had breached the AVO multiple times, contacting her through calls and multiple social media accounts. Detectives also explored Mackenzie's broader relationships. They interviewed her mother, Tabitha Ackert, who shared her daughter's fears about Thompson. In a statement to the court, later reported by the Newcastle Herald, Tabitha said, "Mackenzie lived in constant fear after Tyrone's release. She told me he wouldn't let her go." Friends echoed this, describing how Mackenzie had confided about Thompson's persistent attempts to reconnect. One friend told police, "She wanted to protect her son, but she felt trapped, like there was no way out." During police questioning, Thompson's statements were guarded but revealing. According to court reports later cited by the Newcastle Herald, he claimed the incident was a chaotic misunderstanding. He admitted to being at Mackenzie's apartment that night, despite the AVO, but insisted he had been invited. He described an argument that escalated, alleging that Mackenzie had been the aggressor, wielding a knife in a heated moment. His account painted a picture of self-defense, claiming his hand injury came from trying to disarm her. "She came at me, and I just reacted," he reportedly told detectives, though his story shifted under scrutiny, with inconsistencies about the sequence of events. He denied any intent to harm her, but his explanation struggled to align with the physical evidence: the broken knife, Mackenzie's fatal injuries, and witness accounts of her desperation to escape. Detectives pressed Thompson on his actions in the days leading up to the incident. They confronted him with evidence of his repeated AVO breaches, including messages and calls to Mackenzie and her associates. Thompson downplayed these, saying he was trying to sort things out and maintain a connection for the sake of their shared history. But Mackenzie's emails to advocacy groups, expressing fear that he would come for her, contradicted his narrative. The police also examined Thompson's interactions with Mackenzie's male friend, who was present earlier that evening, probing whether jealousy or rivalry had fueled the confrontation. As Thompson sat in custody, the investigation continued to solidify the case. Forensic reports confirmed Mackenzie's blood on the knife, and Thompson's DNA was present on the handle, strengthening the link. The autopsy of Mackenzie Anderson revealed she suffered 78 stab wounds inflicted in less than 3 minutes. On March 27, 2022, Thompson was formally charged with murder, breaching an AVO, and related offenses tied to the events of that night. The murder charge was anchored by compelling evidence: the knife fragments bearing Mackenzie's blood, the witness accounts of her screams, and Thompson's presence at the scene with a suspicious injury. Additional charges included intimidating behavior, reflecting his pattern of harassment in the weeks prior. The motive, while not explicitly stated by Thompson, emerged through the investigation's findings. Detectives and domestic violence experts consulted by Strikeforce Slant concluded that Thompson's actions were driven by a need to reassert control over Mackenzie, who had been trying to move forward with her life and protect her son. His history of assault and intimidation, combined with his relentless contact after prison, suggested a refusal to let her go. The presence of Mackenzie's male friend that night may have been a catalyst, intensifying Thompson's fixation. The charges against Thompson were a step toward justice, but they also highlighted the failures that allowed him to remain a threat. By early 2025, the case had reached a critical juncture in the Newcastle Supreme Court, where the pursuit of justice for the 21-year-old mother unfolded. Initially set for a 4-week trial starting April 7, 2025, the case took a dramatic turn when Tyrone Thompson, then 25, changed his plea. On April 1, 2025, in the New South Wales Supreme Court, he pleaded guilty to the domestic violence murder of Mackenzie Anderson, halting the need for a full trial. This plea came after years of denials, during which he had maintained his not guilty stance, even as evidence mounted against him. The guilty plea was a significant moment, sparing Mackenzie's family the pain of a protracted trial, but shifting the focus to the sentencing hearing, where the court would determine the consequences of his actions. The hearing, presided over by Justice Richard Weinstein, became a pivotal moment for all involved. The prosecution, led by Crown Prosecutor Brendan Queenan, presented a harrowing case. They argued that Thompson's actions on March 25, 2022, were a brutal culmination of a pattern of control and violence. Court documents detailed how Thompson, on parole for prior domestic violence offenses against Mackenzie, ignored an apprehended violence order and broke into her Mayfield apartment twice that night. Using 2 kitchen knives, he stabbed her 78 times in less than 3 minutes, an attack so ferocious that one knife snapped. The prosecution emphasized Mackenzie's vulnerability, noting her repeated attempts to seek safety through advocacy groups and her fear that Thompson would harm her after his release. The defense, representing Thompson, acknowledged the gravity of his actions but sought leniency by highlighting mitigating factors. They argued that Thompson's mental health issues and challenging background diminished his moral culpability. According to Newcastle Weekly, his legal team submitted that he was not psychotic at the time of the crime, but struggled with emotional instability, which contributed to the escalation. An apology letter from Thompson was tendered, in which he expressed regret, stating, "No words can undo the pain and devastation I caused to someone I genuinely loved." However, the prosecution challenged this, with Queenan noting, "There is some element of victim blaming," pointing to Thompson's claim that the relationship was very physical with us both at times. Justice Weinstein, wary of the letter's sincerity, remarked that it offered limited insight into true remorse. On May 1, 2025, Justice Weinstein delivered the sentence. Thompson was jailed for a maximum of 22 years and 6 months, with a non-parole period of 15 years and 6 months, making him eligible for parole in 2038. The judge described the attack as a frenzied act of such ferocity that it left Mackenzie's family shattered, noting their helplessness, despair, and anger. He acknowledged the aggravating factors, including Thompson's prior violence and Mackenzie's fear, but also considered his guilty plea and personal circumstances in setting the term. The sentence sparked immediate outrage from Mackenzie's family, particularly her mother, Tabitha Ackritt. Outside the Newcastle Supreme Court, she collapsed in tears, telling reporters, "Whilst this might be thought of as a good outcome for the courts, we are disgusted that this sentence is what they think the value of my daughter's life was worth." She called the sentence an insult to women globally and demanded an appeal. On May 14, 2025, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions announced it would appeal Thompson's sentence, arguing it was manifestly inadequate for the crime's severity. Tabitha welcomed the decision, stating, "This is the first hurdle to getting a sentence that is more in line with community and moral standards." The appeal, set for a 2-hour hearing in the Court of Criminal Appeal on August 8, 2025, aims to increase Thompson's jail time, with prosecutors citing the need to set a stronger precedent against domestic violence offenders. The case's current status leaves Thompson in prison, awaiting the appeal's outcome, while Mackenzie's family continues their advocacy. The appeal could reshape the sentence, but no verdict can undo the loss. For Mackenzie's son, now in the care of relatives and her loved ones, the fight is as much about honoring her memory as it is about ensuring others don't suffer the same fate. The question lingers: will the legal system deliver a punishment that reflects the true cost of Mackenzie's life, or will it fall short again? Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think the appeal will bring? Until next time, stay curious, Stay safe and keep watching.